So today I want to talk about Quantum Torah, which is a website, but also it means Torah the light. So Quantum Torah is a website by Alexander Poltrak, who looks at the ways in which science matches deeper, like where there's room for deeper understanding in the Torah. So first of all, the Planck is the smallest time or space unit length that has any meaning. And this is like the idea of a letter, right? A letter before it even means anything. Zeir Anpin is considered this like tube, which is like all the different faculties of life, like the organism with all its sides. So it represents the abstract idea of the purpose of creation and divine intention as they exist in the mind of God. While the nukva, which is like, okay, so Zeir Anpin is more like the tube, like the masculine, like the energy force. The nukva, like this receptive energy, like that wants to go towards something to receive it, right? Like running with arms open. So while the nukva represents the drive to actualization of this idea in the lower worlds, however, there's always a danger that the nukva will get too involved in the lower worlds and lose the sense of purpose. So this like rushing with arms open, you can imagine it was rushing towards what it was supposed to, but then it got distracted or it got weighed down and then it was going for something else. The connection to the abstract idea, which was the original. So I started with the Planck, which is like this letter even, or this idea. It's like the smallest unit that's meaningful. But this is in like science. I'm just holding a colored pencil. But in this case, I'm talking about Kabbalah. So Kabbalah means to receive. So it's this like, this spillage of light happens when the receiver is not really like matching properly to the giver. And those ideas are, it's, so the original abstract idea is not being met by the manifestation force, which is the receiver of the idea that can put it into action. So this spillage of light gives vitality to forces of evil. We would say evil here is stuff that's not connected to the original abstract idea of the divine, or they even oppose it. The nukva must connect with her male counterpart. So she must connect with the original idea, the initial intention, in order to reflect back the excess light. This excess light goes back, so it comes down from above, and then it goes back up, not fully to the top, but to a place where it can be sent out into the world. So when we talk about sent out in the world, there's a couple traditions and commandments that bond us to the Creator. First of all, there's this mystical dimension of first fruits. It's called bikurim. So we give our first fruits back to the Creator. If anyone remembers Cain and Hevel, they had to give their best. They had to give an offering. So Cain just gave, he was a shepherd, but he didn't give his best. So he may have given what others might say is better to give animals to God. It's more life rather than the whole animal. Not more life, sorry, more like substantial, versus the plants, which are grown just from the ground. It's not like you have to care for them in the same way necessarily, but actually he gave his first, he gave his best. So that was that idea. And it's this giving, this expansion, it's this abundance connection. Acts of charity parallel this, what they used to do in the temple with the first fruits. Like I said, they'd give their first fruits to the Creator and offer it up as an offering. These 10 sfirot, 7 of which are in the Zeir Anpin, that tube, 7 of them are there. They parallel the fruits in the basket. The vessels of these, right, the feminine aspect to each of these 10 sfirot parallel the basket that holds the fruit, where the gaps in the basket correspond to the holes in the vessels of these attributes. So it's like Swiss cheese, and charity makes these gaps. Okay, so gaps in the garment that encompass the body for light abundance to irradiate and diffuse. It also says in Tanya that tzedakah is like, Tanya is written by the Alter Rebbe, the Grand Master. You can find it on the internet, or you can get a book in a Jewish store. Tzedakah is like a garb of chainmail, each coin or each action paralleling a scale. So, using this chainmail armor metaphor to physical space, you could say space originates in this nukva, this feminine, the space to receive, right? To have arms open. I'm ready. even with literally physical sex, the woman has to be relaxed so her vagina can open. So this, using the structural parallel between the basket and space, a chain of mail is made of interlocking small rings. Physical dimensions in this parallel would have to be made of tiny, interconnected circles of sorts, and that's exactly what loop quantum gravity, the theorists and the researchers are saying about the nature of space, that it's all these little things that connect together. So to bring this all together for a moment is to say that our ideas, our desires, each idea creates its own little loop of reality, and they connect together. And there's going to be holes in them, but if we do enough charity, enough goodness, and enough times of connecting to the initial divine intention, each of these actions together, loop it together, and then we don't have holes, but we do have holes in order for these ideas to come in. So it may sound complicated, but it's actually quite simple, because what it means is that we receive this energy that the initial idea gives us so that we could share. If we forget that we're receiving to share, we just receive for the self alone. So that's really where to keep in mind what we're doing. And now I'm going to talk about from Rudy Newman. I'm going to start today, but, or maybe I don't do this today because there's quite a lot here, but maybe I start today and then I continue perhaps another day. But I will start today. So this is from Rudy Newman, who lives in Washington, and he talks about this from the Christian perspective, but it's relevant to talk about it from any perspective, especially with the days of awe coming up for the Jewish tradition, where we coronate and admit the kingship of the Master of the world. So whenever I've experienced, am experiencing, or shall experience pain or offense of any sort, whether it's emotional or physical, as the result of any person's or group's actions, whether in word or deed, whether intentional or unintentional, at any time, past, present, or future, myself or anyone else about whom I care, in obedience to God and for my own sake, I both now and in the future will continue to forgive them, give thanks, pray for them, and if it comes up again, practice it all over again, do good to them, love them, bless them in word and in deed, and lend to them expecting nothing in return. Why? Because we're committing to praying for and blessing those we care about, those who hurt us, those who are offenders. We say good about them, speaking encouraging words to them, encouraging them spiritually, serving them, providing